She had worked so hard to prepare a full breakfast for her husband and sons, but when she finally finished and sat down to eat, she realized there was not a single slice of bread left in the basket. Although she had long gotten used to this kind of thing, a flash of disappointment still crossed her face. With no other choice, she could only buy a fried dough stick on her way to work to fill her stomach. She was supposed to have a free and hopeful life, but now she was trapped in this cheap apartment, treated by her family like a live-in maid. Every night, her husband's thunderous snoring kept her from sleeping, and every morning she had to be the first one up, preparing meals for a family of 4. Her 2 sons had long gotten used to being waited on hand and foot, and not one of them ever came over to help. The floor polisher at home had been broken for an entire year, and every time Mercedes asked her husband to fix it, he brushed her off by saying he was too busy with work. But his so-called busy job was nothing more than waiting at home for customers to come over so he could take their photos. Even the camera had been left behind by Mercedes's father. Compared with her husband's easy life, Mercedes not only had endless housework every day, but also held a respectable job as an assistant to a judge. That day, she had just arrived at work when a new case landed on her desk. A shooting had taken place at the city's most famous 5-star hotel, and Mercedes and the judge rushed to the scene immediately. By then, a huge crowd of reporters had already gathered outside the hotel. The moment Mercedes reached the entrance, she saw a woman with an extraordinary presence, covered in blood, and she was the shooter in this case, the world-famous writer María. María had once won the Nobel Prize in Literature, and was someone many women admired and envied, but no one could have expected that such an elegant, bookish woman would kill her own lover in front of everyone. After the initial investigation at the crime scene, Maria's personal belongings were taken back to the courthouse, where Mercedes was responsible for keeping them safe. She did not put the items away right away, but opened Maria's bag without permission. Inside, apart from a set of keys, were several cosmetics every woman might carry, as if possessed by some strange impulse. Mercedes opened the lipstick and applied it to her dull, colorless lips. The bright red not only made her lips look fuller, but also made her whole face suddenly glow. After putting away the things that did not belong to her, Mercedes continued assisting the judge with the investigation. When María was brought in for questioning, she was so calm that no one could read her thoughts, and even when reporters surrounded her, her expression never changed. She admitted that she had shot the victim with a small pistol, but said that had not been her original intention. After years of working as the judge's assistant, Mercedes could tell that the judge was full of sympathy for María. Sure enough, after the lawyer suggested that María might have a mental illness, the judge agreed to have her undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Before the results came out, she did not have to be sent to prison, and could instead stay temporarily at a convent far from the reporters until the day of sentencing. To ensure her basic needs were met, the judge allowed her to change into clean clothes, but the question was who would go to her home to get them. Maria's only sister lived in another city, and it was inconvenient for her lawyer to enter her apartment. In the end, the judge decided to give the keys to Mercedes and have her make the trip to Maria's home. Mercedes opened Maria's bag for the second time and took out the keys. The moment she walked into the room, her eyes instantly lit up, because this place was exactly the home of her dreams. Although the wind outside was bitterly cold, the apartment was warm as spring, with thriving green plants everywhere. The various artworks displayed on the table all revealed the unique taste of the woman who lived there. Of course, on the dressing table, there were also the jewelry and cosmetics a woman could not do without. Through these objects, Mercedes saw the life of an independent woman, a way of living completely different from her own. She walked to the wardrobe and picked out a change of clothes for María. Inside were all kinds of beautifully designed garments made from high-quality fabrics. By comparison, Mercedes's own clothes were cheap and textureless, and she did not even have a wardrobe that truly belonged to her. After packing the clothes, she did not leave immediately, but watered every single plant. After that, she drank a large glass of water with a heart full of thoughts before finally leaving the apartment. By the time she got home from work, night had fallen, and the whole neighborhood was filled with barking dogs and the noisy voices of neighbors. Her husband and sons had not waited for her and had already eaten dinner, leaving Mercedes only a messy table and a sink piled with empty plates. The next day, Mercedes handed the clothes to Maria's lawyer, then continued working on the investigation. Through questioning eyewitnesses, the judge learned the general situation at the time of the incident. At the time, María and the victim had arranged to meet at the hotel. Not long after they sat down, the victim said he was about to get married and no longer had any feelings for María. Witnesses vaguely heard the victims say things like they should never see each other again. Strangely, Maria did not fly into a rage at the time, but soon stood up and shot the man at close range. After it happened, she did not run away, but knelt beside the victim and forcefully kissed his wound. No one knew what she was truly thinking. According to the victim's younger brother, Maria was a moody and fiercely independent woman. His brother had proposed to her several times, and she had refused every time. After breaking up and getting back together several times, his brother finally came to his senses and began looking for new love. That was exactly why Maria had pulled the trigger. Yet in Maria's sister's eyes, her younger sister was a sensitive and fragile woman who did not know how to be alone. Her ex-husband, who had been married to Maria for 13 years, said she was a smart, admirable, good woman. She not only loved reading and spoke with wit, but was also a loving and wonderful mother. After learning all this, the judge became even more convinced that Maria had committed the act because she was suffering from mental illness. That weekend, Mercedes once again woke early to the sound of her husband's snoring. She wrapped a piece of bread in a handkerchief and put it into her bag, along with a set of keys that did not belong to her. Nervous and uneasy, she arrived outside an upscale apartment building. After hesitating for a long time, she still opened that door. This was Maria's home, and also a home Mercedes could never afford no matter how hard she worked her whole life. To her, this was not just a luxury apartment, but a sanctuary forever out of reach. Using the convenience of her position, she had secretly taken the keys and returned here for the second time. And this time her state of mind was completely different. She took a book written by Maria from the shelf, then took out the bread she had brought from home and slowly ate it in the comfort of sunlight brushing across her face. Suddenly, a piece of sausage in the bread accidentally fell onto her clothes. Mercedes found some soap, washed the stained part clean, then hung the wet clothing on a chair to dry. But even this free sunlight felt like a luxury to Mercedes, because the apartment she lived in never got sunlight all year round, and clothes there could only dry little by little in the wind. After a simple breakfast, she sat down at Maria's desk, freely enjoying this stolen room and stolen time, fighting for a brief moment of peace for herself. But once she walked out of this apartment, she returned to the same old track of her life. According to the doctor's psychiatric evaluation of Maria, the result confirmed that she was only going through menopause, but the judge proposed a second examination. As long as it could prove that Maria's mind truly had a problem, she could be found not guilty. Of course, Mercedes did not want Maria to be released right now, because she still wanted to keep occupying someone else's nest and return to that apartment. She advised the judge not to go against public opinion, because the newspaper headlines were all calling Maria a cold-blooded female killer. Her words worked exactly as she hoped, and the judge decided to summon several witnesses before making a decision. During this period, Mercedes left early and came home late every day, returning to Maria's apartment again and again, moving in and out as if she were the lady of the house. She sat at the dining table eating pasta she had cooked herself, lay on Maria's bed reading the novels Maria had written, and sprayed perfume for the first time in her life. As if that still was not enough, she took every piece of clothing from the wardrobe and tried them on, then ended it all with a comfortable hot bath. Her life had reached a peak she had never experienced before. But one day, when she came to the apartment again, wearing Maria's nightgown and bracelet, she was caught red-handed, and the person who caught her was Maria's ex-husband. The ex-husband clearly did not recognize her as the judge's assistant. Mercedes also lied, claiming she was Maria's distant cousin. Although Mercedes's story was full of holes, the ex-husband did not seem to care, and even started talking with her about Maria's motive for killing. He said Maria had shot her lover out of love for art. To him, this was not murder, but a tribute. Previously, a great novelist had also shot and wounded his lover in that same hotel, and was eventually pardoned by the president and released without conviction. After a long conversation, the two danced gracefully to the music, and the ex-husband also exposed Mercedes's identity. After more than 10 years of marriage, he knew very well that Maria had no such relative. Mercedes nearly fled in panic, but the ex-husband said it did not matter who she was. In this house, they could forget themselves and completely empty their minds. His words suddenly struck the most fragile place in Mercedes's heart. After gathering herself, she let her body move freely with the music, wearing Maria's dazzling life over her own. As the number of times she entered the apartment increased, Mercedes grew bolder and bolder. She even went to work directly in Maria's clothes, with Maria's gold bracelets still on her wrist. These changes were noticed not only by her colleagues, but even by her usually careless husband. That day, the judge asked Mercedes to visit the convent and learn about Maria's living conditions there. For this, Mercedes specifically brought the camera from home, and before leaving, even took a picture of herself in the mirror. Although the camera had been left behind by her father, film was expensive, so Mercedes had never been willing to take pictures of herself. She arrived at the convent, and while waiting for Maria, an elderly woman with unsteady steps came over and begged her to take a photo. Mercedes pointed the camera at her, but did not press the shutter, but the elderly woman thought the picture had already been taken, and told Mercedes why she had been locked up here. Seeing that Mercedes seemed a little nervous, the elderly woman said she was not some wicked person beyond redemption, because her son-in-law had abused her daughter for years. She had been forced to do what she did. Now her daughter and grandson could sleep well every night, and even though she herself was locked up here, she felt very happy. If the elderly woman's experience deeply touched Mercedes, then Maria's words shook Mercedes to her core. She went to Maria's room and took several photos, finally leaving her with a solo portrait. When Mercedes asked why she had killed someone, Maria did not answer directly, but said with deep meaning that a person must build their own freedom. After coming out, Mercedes did not leave immediately, but gently pressed the shutter at the elderly woman in the crowd. When she returned home, she found many relatives had come over. Her husband was laughing and chatting with them, while she had to take charge of everyone's dinner. Even when her hand was burned, no one cared. The pain in her fingers, mixed with the noise outside, instantly caused Mercedes's mental defenses to collapse. She quietly wiped away her tears and walked out, only to find that her husband had actually prepared a surprise for her. The polisher that had been broken for more than a year was finally fixed. He did this only to remind Mercedes that her whole heart should belong at home. At that moment, Mercedes could no longer control the emotions she had kept buried. At Maria's home, she had read Maria's diary and knew that one of Maria's admirers had once given her a floor polisher every housewife would dream of, only for Maria to throw it into the river without mercy. Thinking of her own situation, Mercedes finally walked out of the house and escaped to the apartment that symbolized freedom, but to her surprise, her husband followed her all the way there. He stepped onto the spotless carpet wearing shoes covered in mud, and that single scene instantly shattered Mercedes's beautiful dream. After seeing the photos, her husband finally understood that she had secretly broken into the home of a killer, but he did not understand what Mercedes was truly thinking. Mercedes told her husband that this was peace. That night, her husband did not leave, and Mercedes spent the night in the apartment for the first time. Yet just like at home, she was awakened by her husband's deafening snoring. Before leaving, she scrubbed the stain from the carpet with all her strength, and still went to work wearing Maria's clothes. Soon, the judge delivered the final verdict in the case. Maria was sentenced to 541 days in prison for manslaughter. After hearing the verdict, Mercedes instantly felt relieved. This meant she could continue staying in the apartment for a very long time. Although her husband advised her not to come here anymore, Mercedes at this point seemed possessed, and was completely different from the person she used to be. Just like that, she spent a period of happy and free time in a place that did not belong to her. Until 541 days later, Maria was released from prison by presidential pardon, and Mercedes's beautiful life came to an end. She put every item in the room back where it belonged, restoring everything to the way it had been when she first arrived. After that, she reluctantly took photos of every corner where she had once spent time, because only photographs could prove that she had once possessed all of this. Mercedes sat in the cafe across from the apartment and watched Maria return home with her own eyes. No one knew what she was thinking in that moment, but from the look in her eyes, it was clear that she was not satisfied, and that she could never possibly go back to the life she had before.